If you're ready, we can start.
Ok.
Ok. Buongiorno ragazzi, nuovo episodio del podcast. Oggi ho l'enorme piacere di avere qui come ospite Pete Rubish, che tutti già sicuramente conoscono. Chi abbia più di 25-26 anni e fa powerlifting sicuramente lo conosce. Ehm, Anche questa volta ci sarà un po' di avanti e indietro con l'italiano e inglese, un po' di traduzioni, perdonatemi se non sarò precisissimo, ma è tutto improvvisato al volo, quindi faccio meglio che posso. Hello Pete, introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I've been powerlifting for about 17 years now, and my best lifts are a 772 pound, 350 kilo squat, 485 pound, 220 kilo bench, and then 920 pound, roughly 417 and a half kilo deadlifts. And I've totaled 2,100 pounds. Um, was on PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, steroids for 9 years and came off everything. So I've been off everything for about 2.5 years now. And I'm just trying to be healthier and kind of pass along the knowledge now rather than taking stuff myself and pushing the limits as much myself. So it's just been a new way, a new direction in life.
Yeah, I've been following your journey since I can't say since the beginning, but I've been following you for a while, and I know your journey now, being off the stuff, and it's interesting, and I really appreciate the knowledge you are sharing with people. So, in fact, if it's okay for you, I would like to talk a little bit today about the difference between training on PEDs and without.
Yeah, 100%. I try to be very open about that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things I want to be fully transparent and help people out and answer any questions because obviously I have a lot of experience doing that and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm trying to go the other route and be as healthy as I can. So I'm all about educating everybody about that stuff.
Okay. So you were on since, correct me if I'm wrong, since when you were like 20,
Yes, sir.
correct? Okay. Did you ever compete? I mean, before now, but when you were young, compete drug-free, or your first meet was already on gear?
Yes, so I did, I believe, 3 meets drug free. I did my first meet was USAPL, which is basically IPF in America.
Oh,
It was at the time. And I did that when I was 17. That was my first meet, 17 years old. But I started lifting at age 13, 14. And then I did a couple other meets that were drug tested. They were called WABDL. It's a federation in the United States where it's just bench press and deadlift. They don't even squat. So I did deadlift only in those meets because that was kind of the lift where I found out I was most gifted with. And I just wanted to push deadlift as high as I could at the time. My interest in powerlifting as a whole wasn't as high, even though I was obviously still benching and squatting. But 3 meets total, and then at age 20, like you said, I jumped on PEDs and started competing a lot more at that point, and then really just kind of pushed the envelope as high as I could.
ok, ho chiesto a Pete di parlare cioè l'idea di oggi è di parlare principalmente della differenza tra allenarsi nel powerlifting natural o con farmaci. Lui ha iniziato a prendere farmaci quando aveva 20 anni, ma prima aveva già fatto 3 gare da natural e la prima gara era sotto l'IPF, nella Federazione Americana sotto l'IPF, che è cosa che non sapevo. What about the infamous backyard meet, the one at Super Training? It was a fantastic meet. I still watch it sometimes in YouTube. How old were you there?
That was when I believe I was 21 or 20. I can't remember
Oh,
exactly
okay.
because that was, well, let's see here, 2013, I think it was. So I had to be 21 because I'm 31 now. And that was just so memorable because that was the first major trip I got to take from a powerlifting standpoint, where Mark Bell kind of invited me out, and I was lifting among the great lifters like Eric Lillybridge and
Yeah.
Stan Efferding, and all these guys were just so amazing. And I looked up to them, and just to be in that company was unreal. So that was the first major trip where I got kind of a cool opportunity with powerlifting to go out to California. Never been out there before, and it's kind of weird because I'm going back to Sacramento to Mark Bell's gym in 4 weeks or just
Oh,
over
really?
three. Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. So
For
I'll
the
be back
podcast?
out there.
Are you going there for the podcast?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I'm going out to be on Mark's podcast on April 25th.
Oh.
And I've been out there twice before to Mark's gym, Sacramento. So 2013 for the backyard meet. That was the first time. And then I think we went out in 2017 or 2018, I believe. So it's been a few years, been about 5 years. Every 5 years we seem to go out there.
Oh, so the last time you were there, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were training 900 pounds deadlift at Mark Bell Super Training Gym, right?
Yeah, that was when I was trying to pull 900 pounds at his gym, and my hamstring was like torn. It was all purple and
I
blue, and
remember it.
yeah, it was fun still. I mean, it wasn't really painful, but it wasn't obviously 100%. But I went out there, and then I had like a meet 2 weeks later or a week later or something like that. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. I love going out there and talking to those guys and just seeing everybody.
Well, talking about injuries and stuff like that, for me, and for other people around me that are drug free, it's something mind blowing. It's unbelievable to think that you can try to pull 900 with an hamstring that is torn. How is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I had a lot of injuries when I was on PEDs. Um, Definitely you're more susceptible to injuries when you're on performance enhancing drugs and anabolic steroids because you're pushing your body to the limits of or past the limits of what it should be capable of. So there were a lot of muscle tears all the time, little stuff like I would have muscles pop, my quad or my low back or adductors or whatever. You'd be lifting and you'd feel something pop, be out for like a month. But the one thing about that, you could kind of come back quicker, but you were always getting injured. So it was just became the norm where I was just used to like training through it. My hamstring, it didn't really hurt. It was so weird. It bruised up and everything, but the pain was actually not bad at all. Whereas I've had other ones that were very painful. And obviously I wasn't going to be able to push through. Like when I tore my quad trying to squat 355 kilos, I could barely walk for like 6 weeks. So it just depends on the injury, really.
Ho chiesto, stiamo parlando un po' di episodi del passato, di quando lui è andato da Mark Bell Super Training e dei suoi famosissimi, delle sue primissime famose gare che ha fatto nella palestra di Mark Bell ancora nel 2013, credo. Lo trovate su YouTube, è stato un video molto seguito. Luigi già utilizzava farmaci. E adesso mi sta raccontando che deve tornare prossimamente ad aprile da Mark Bell per fare di nuovo un podcast e che periodicamente ci torna lì, diceva ogni 4-5 anni ci finisco lì e dicevamo che la volta scorsa che c'era stata aveva provato a fare 900 libbre che sono 412, 415, 400, una roba del genere chili di stacco e quel giorno lì sul video, se guardate, lui ha praticamente un bicipite femorale strappato, si vede proprio l'ematoma viola dietro la gamba e comunque riusciva, cioè ha provato lo stesso, riusciva a spingere, stava tutto sommato abbastanza bene. E da lì si è attaccato il discorso e ha iniziato a accennarmi al fatto che molto probabilmente, o perlomeno lui dice che è sicuramente più suscettibile agli infortuni quando si è sotto ciclo, quando si utilizzano farmaci, probabilmente perché spinge di più al limite il suo corpo e che capitano più frequentemente e che in quel caso specifico lui comunque riusciva, cioè gli dava fastidio, però comunque riusciva a allenarsi, a spingere, mentre in un caso in cui si è strappato il quadricipite facendo 300, provando 350 kg di squat, poi lì invece era molto più problematica e non, insomma gli dava problemi a camminare anche dopo 6 settimane. So, talking about injuries and PEDs, my guess is that, as you told me before, the odds to injure yourself while on staff is higher. It seems like to me that I don't know if it's the magnitude of the weight or if the reason is because maybe you're pushing yourself more or you're doing more reckless things. I don't know why, but it seems to me that it's easier to get injured on PEDs. What do you think?
Yes, 100%. And I think the reason more so than anything is simply that you're lifting weights that you would largely be incapable of doing without PEDs. You're moving weights that are so past your capabilities that the body really can't hold up to that. Because the thing about PEDs is Well, they strengthen the muscles. Obviously, we've heard that they don't strengthen the joints and tendons. So the joints and tendons and the connective tissue cannot keep up with the rate of progression that we see with the muscles. So I'd say that's the largest determining factor, because let's say naturally you're going to be deadlifting, I mean, even 340 kilos, which is a high number, but let's say 340 kilos naturally is what you'd be capable of. Well, then you could get on PEDs like trenbolone, and you could be deadlifting right around 405 kgs. So that's a pretty significant jump. You know, that's 65 kilos. It's a huge jump, and that difference is where the body starts to be incapable of keeping up with it, and the injuries crop up. So I wouldn't even say that you're pushing yourself any harder. I don't think anyone on PEDs is training harder necessarily than a natural lifter. I feel like everyone trains pretty hard in general. I just think the rate of progression is so much faster and so much more than what you would be capable of on your own, that it's essentially pushing past the body's limitations.
Mm. Ho chiesto a Pete se pensa che sia più frequente e perché, per come, il tasso di infortuni su chi utilizza farmaci. Mi ha detto di sì, e non pensa sia necessariamente dovuto al fatto che i pesi sono più alti, ma al fatto che vai oltre quello che sarebbe, diciamo, il tuo limite naturale, e quindi se, c'è l'esempio, se tu hai la possibilità di fare 340 kg di stacco da natural, che comunque sono un gran chili, ma con certi tipi di farmaci in certe modalità riesci a farne mai 400, ecco, quei 60 kg lì sono un bel balzo, e spesso c'è una progressione molto veloce, e quindi questo ti espone a maggior rischio di infortuni. Non penso sia necessariamente una questione di allenarsi più intensamente o più, diciamo, con più intensità, che porta a infortuni chi utilizza farmaci, ma pensa che sia più che altro una questione che vai oltre, cioè che spingi oltre quello che tendenzialmente il tuo corpo sarebbe progettato a fare, perché hai un boost, un incremento notevole di forza a livello muscolare, ma dal suo punto di vista tutto l'apparato legamentoso e tendineo non è allo stesso ritmo dell'apparato muscolare. Pete, do you think it changed a lot? I mean, the rates and the number of injuries, it changed based on the fact that you are always on cruise, or that you goes on and off? Because in my opinion, it's easier to be reckless if you go off, you stop training, or at least you're training much lighter, and then you jump on again, and you feel good. The strength goes on very quickly, and it's easier, and it's tricky you want to push it. So maybe the rate of the strength gain is much higher and much quicker, and maybe that's why and how it happens. What do you think?
Yes, so it's definitely that rate of progression is so much faster, and you get motivated because you see your results taking off, to where making 5 kilo jumps every week is not a problem, or and the progression is sustained for quite a long period of time. So you're constantly seeing your body morph. You're seeing your physique look better and better, and you're seeing the numbers on the bar just keep going up to a certain extent for a while. So I never really came off either over that nine-year period. I would just drop my doses down to where I'd be cruising on a little bit of testosterone, or not even a little bit. It was just testosterone, 250 milligrams or so. And then I would periodically, or quite often, to be quite frank, add in other compounds. Trenbolone was very common, which is the strongest steroid out there, along with anadrol, things like that. And you just you get so much stronger, even going from testosterone to trenbolone, that it's hard to hold back. Like you said, you're not training in as disciplined of a manner. It's more reckless. You're more likely to do almost reckless lifts that shouldn't be the case. You're always wanting to go heavy because you're seeing such good results. So that definitely accelerates the rate of injury as well, because from a mental standpoint, you feel almost superhuman, particularly on trenbolone. I almost put that in a category of its own, because the other steroids, you'd feel stronger, but you didn't feel this superhuman effect, whereas you did feel that on tren. So that one in particular made it to where I would really push the envelope, and that would accelerate the injuries, and that's where they usually would occur. on that.
Ok, ho chiesto a Pete se pensa che ci sia una componente anche magari di essere tentati da spingere, di fare cose un po' poco prudenti per il fatto che quando stacchi e poi riattacchi i farmaci hai un incremento molto veloce della forza e la tentazione comunque di spingere e fare cose poco prudenti è elevata, o se comunque cambia in base, cioè la possibilità di farsi male cambia in base al fatto di stare sempre a una dose di mantenimento costante o fare on and off. E mi ha detto sì, che c'è una componente sicuramente notevole dal punto di vista della tentazione psicologica di andare pesanti o di azzardare, per il fatto che comunque tu quando sei sotto il ciclo o quando da off parti on, torni on, dove sistematicamente settimana in settimana tu ti senti bene, ti senti che la progressione va avanti, che riesci sempre a mettere quei 5 kg in più e quindi è difficile trattenersi e diciamo stare prudenti. Nel suo caso mi diceva anche, mi ha fatto un accenno del suo caso personale dove è stato 9 anni continuativi con i farmaci e in questi anni continuativi faceva dei periodi in cui aggiungeva delle cose a una base di testo di, mi pare, 250 mg a settimana e in particolare che quando aggiungeva il tren, che insomma lui ne ha parlato più volte, si hanno dei bruschi incrementi di forza e quindi questo si può essere un contributo sicuramente al farsi male perché è difficile trattenersi perché la forza sale molto velocemente. Ehm, what about the different modalities about the way you program the training uh, for a natural person, for a natural trainer, athlete, I mean, or a person who is enhanced? What are the main difference? Because I know you coach, you're a coach, so you coach both way. Tell me your opinion.
Now, truthfully, it isn't a huge difference in terms of how I would program either or. In some instances, I do feel that natural lifters have to train with more volume, higher frequencies
Mm,
to be able to progress. So it's almost as if the steroid enhanced lifter can get away with doing less, but also they're pushing heavier loads, heavier intensity ranges to where they can't recover as well, even with steroids, to where their joints are getting more beat up. The one thing I remember is I always had a lot of joint aches and pains to where my elbows would be achy. They were always hurting, shoulders. So you have all these joints that are constantly aching when you're on steroids from the inflammation, because steroids cause a lot of systemic inflammation. There's a lot of wear and tear on the body that you don't get naturally. So in some regards, you can actually train more volume, more frequency as a natural lifter because you're not dealing with this systemic inflammation. That's probably the biggest difference. But how I would ideally set up the programming for a steroid lifter as opposed to a natural lifter would be quite similar. It's just a matter
mm,
of if the person on steroids can stay healthy, and then if they're willing to listen, because someone on steroids is much more apt to want to push the envelope and max
yeah,
out and go heavy and go off program.
yeah,
And
of course.
the discipline is less on steroids in a sense because you want to go as heavy as possible. So I see that a lot. But as far as how I would set up the training, it would be pretty similar.
Ok, ho chiesto a Pete siccome lui allena sia persone natural sia persone con farmaci, ho chiesto la differenza di come imposterebbe un programma per un natural o per una persona con farmaci. Mi ha detto che in linea di massima chi utilizza farmaci, che può sembrare paradossale, però tollerano meno volume e deve stare un po' più attento alla quantità di lavoro che fanno, perché probabilmente perché cioè, spingono oltre quello che sarebbe il loro naturale potenziale, quindi hanno un'usura, un consumo del corpo più alto, un'infiammazione generale più alta, doloretti qua e là più frequenti, che lui diceva anche nel caso suo, la spalla, il gomito, questo e quell'altro, cose che sono dovute un po' come conseguenza dell'utilizzare i farmaci. Mentre un natural può, cioè, funziona meglio spalmare, avere più volume, avere una frequenza maggiore. Um, what you said is the same. Mike Tuchscherer told me the other day. I was on the podcast with Mike Tuchscherer the other day, and I asked the same question. His answer was I don't know exactly the difference because he has not that much experience in both ways. But in his opinion, the volume is different. The amount and quality of volume you can handle with drugs or without is different. And he said it's not, maybe he thinks it's not just because of the magnitude of the weights, but he thinks it's because you are going harder than you could possibly go without the drugs. I don't know if you understand what I mean, because he told me, well, I've been training a lot of people and I train a very, very strong guys, but on drugs, even with the same amount of weight they lift, they can tolerate less volume. With the other lifter, the same strength level, but without drugs, they can handle more volume. So it's the same thing you told me.
That's so fascinating. That's really cool to hear with Mike Tashir, because that is 100%. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear him say that, and that's echoes my sentiments 100% as far as what I've seen from myself and the guys I've trained, to where on drugs you actually can't handle. It's contrary to what you think. You think, oh,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
taking this, yeah, you're taking this enhancement, so you should be able to do more, right? And you can do more weight, but the volume is less because your body can't recover as well from the stress of it, with the inflammation and all that sort of thing. You're more beat up. So I noticed I would often feel more beat up, ironically, on steroids than I do now. I don't feel beat up at all most of the time, but there was this constant like aching, even in your everyday
Yeah.
life. So outside of the gym, you would feel the aches and pains in your elbows and shoulders and just moving around, whereas that's not a thing naturally. So I
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah. Also, I think that it's tricky because when you warm up, you go into the gym, you warm up, you feel strong, you feel good, you feel like the weight is light, so it's very easy to push it again and to lift heavy again, because it's, yeah, the elbow is not so good today, but the weight is light, so you're more likely to push it again. And I think this is maybe a part of the reason why on drugs it's easier to get injured, because the muscle is feeling good, but the joint not so much. So I think it's different, the rate of recovery. As you told me before, it's different, the rate of recovery in the component of the muscle and the component of the ligaments, tendons, or CNS. Are two different components that are affected in a different way by drugs.
Yes, 100%. It's the muscles feel good, to where the muscles always feel recovered for the most part. If you don't, unless you have a tear, an injury, which happens a lot more. So the muscles always feel ready to go, and you can kind of push through things, to where a lot of guys will just kind of mask the joint achiness and pain with ibuprofen or anti-inflammatories, and they just kind of try to ignore it because the muscles themselves feel strong. You feel amazing as far as that goes. It's just everything else. There's this achiness everywhere, full body achiness, where it becomes normal for you to feel that way. You think that's normal because you're so used to it. Whereas then you come off everything and you don't have anything like that. You never feel achy, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize everything hurt all the time because my joints and they couldn't keep up with it. They couldn't keep up with the strength that the muscles were putting on. So really, that's the limiting factor. Even the CNS, the nervous system, you can push it pretty hard. I mean, you're always in a amped up state to a degree on anabolic steroids, to where the nervous system is more primed due to the higher blood pressure and the more adrenaline based state. There's a lot more adrenaline pumping through your body at all times on steroids. So obviously that allows you to activate your nervous system to a much higher degree. And that was one thing. So my nervous system, I felt like, could be pushed harder for longer periods of time as well. Whereas now it's very hard to get in that state. It's very hard to get amped up without these things that were helping with that.
Sì, io e Pete stavamo continuando a parlare del discorso volume e recupero con farmaci o senza, e gli dicevo che l'altro giorno che facevo il podcast con Mike Tushirer, gli avevo chiesto anche a Mike appunto le differenze tra programmare con o senza steroidi, eccetera, e mi diceva che dal suo punto di vista la cosa che ha notato sicuramente diversa è la capacità di recuperare il volume, gestire il volume, che anche a parità di peso sollevato, anche su atleti molto forti, le persone con farmaci tollerano meno volume. E che quindi secondo lui non era solo una questione di quanto peso sollevi, ma è proprio che il fatto che vai oltre quello che sarebbe il tuo limite, che poi ti causa tutta un'usura. E dopo io e Peter abbiamo parlato un altro pochino, no, dei dolori, dell'usura, eccetera, di come con i farmaci sei costantemente indolenzito, affaticato, hai dolori qua e là, ma i muscoli li senti bene. E quindi tu quando vai in palestra, se ti scaldi un attimo, oppure come diceva lui, molti mascherano il dolore con antinfiammatori, tutto sommato spingono, cioè si sentono che hanno forza, il muscolo sta bene, e a meno che non ci sia una lesione muscolare, possono comunque allenarsi pesante, forte, andare pesante, perché la forza c'è, il peso lo sentono leggero e sentono che continuano a migliorare. Questo probabilmente è una bella componente che spiega come mai ci siano anche cioè, più infortuni più facilmente cioè questo insieme agli altri fattori che ho detto prima, nelle persone che utilizzano farmaci potrebbe spiegare come mai ci sono più infortuni. Um, Still talking about volume and the difference between drugs and without drugs. Um, Mostly of the people and the powerlifter I know are drug free. I compete in APF, and most of the people I know compete in IPF. So I don't have much knowledge about drugs and competing with drugs, but uh, I noticed some big differences between the program for drug-free lifter and the way they train with drugs. I don't know exactly what they are doing with people on drugs, but I can see something here and there on social media and stuff like that. And there's no way an IPF lifter for real drug-free can train with such intensity and that low volume. You cannot progress with that kind of programming. Most of the lifter, at least in Italy, and most of the Europe team, we train with much more frequencies, much more volume, often reps in reserve. It's rare to go balls to the balls with a heavy single and then go home or do a bunch of accessories. We usually use a lot of volume to compensate and to train technique, for triples and doubles, but with reps in reserve, like let's say 80, 75, 80, 85%. And you do a bunch of volume with that kind of load. That is always somewhat easier to recover. So then the day after or 2 days after, you can go again in the gym and do the same thing. And it's very common here, but I mean, it's common in Europe in general for IPF lifter to train with, let's say, at least 3 to 4 benches a week, and at least a couple of times of squat. And even more if you're a younger or a very lightweight lifter or a girl, even 3 to 4 times a week for squat, and 2, sometimes 3 deadlifts a week. Depends if regular or sumo and the amount of weight you lift. But there's no one who's lifting just one per week. Let's say deadlift day and bench day. No one lifts that way.
Yes, that's exactly what I've seen. That 100% in agreement. If you're a natural lifter, you're going to have to train with a very high frequency. So I have a lot of my natural guys, most of them benching 4 days a week, squatting usually 2 minimum, but upwards of 3. So it's the exact same kind of thing. And then deadlift is the one where you can get away with less frequency so long as you're squatting a lot. If you're doing a lot of squatting, you don't need as much deadlifting. So deadlift you can get away with once a week, in some instances twice, but often it'll be, I'd say for the majority of my guys, I'll do 4 bench days and then 2 squat and 2 deadlift. So we'll have 2 kind of designated lower body days in some instances where we'll do squat and deadlift on the same day, or we will have 3 main days to where we might do squat, bench, and deadlift on 2 out of the 3, and then we'll still have bench frequency at 4. But I see a lot of my guys do the best in terms of progressing their bench with 4 days a week. You can get away with 3, but as you said, once you start getting into that kind of 2 range for bench or 1 range for squat 1 day per week, you're not going to progress as well. So someone on anabolic steroids, though, they might be so banged up from a heavy bench day that they can only bench twice a week. That's where you're going to see a big difference. Or they might only be able to squat once a week, deadlift once a week. So sometimes with people on anabolic steroids, you have to do a lot more assistance work because they cannot
Yeah,
handle the same amount of main lift volume. Whereas a natural guy is not going to progress on that. If you have a natural lifter and they're only benching twice a week, probably not going to progress. If they're only squatting once a week, same thing. So that's where you have to, as a natural lifter, lift with a much higher frequency to get the same progression as someone who's on anabolic steroids. They could get away with way less.
that's extremely interesting because I asked the same question. I talk about the same topic with Mike Toshirer and with Eric Helms, and we we agreed on this. We were saying the same thing and the same as you are saying now, because in 2018 I did a survey in Italy for the national powerlifting guys here, asking for the frequency and how they train. And I mean, almost everybody doing 4 benches, 2 squats, and 2 deadlift a week. Almost everybody. The difference were if you were a girl or a male or a very heavyweight male, maybe it's less frequency, but I will say that this is the number one routine split we use. And it was the same. Eric Helm told me the other day about New Zealand, and other in Canada and other countries. They use the same split for natural lifter in the IPF and for drug-free lifter in powerlifting. 3 to 4 benches, 2 squats, 2 deadlift. This is the most used. And as you told me before about the accessories to compensate the volume, I was talking about the same thing about the inability to perform as much volume as a enhanced person, so that you need to compensate with accessories. And this is very often what we can see online. We see a very heavy single and then a bunch of bodybuilding stuff after that. There's no way a natural lifter can progress with that kind of plan. It doesn't work.
No, a natural lifter is going to make most of their progress from putting the bulk of their training, 80% into the main lifts with just a smidge of accessories to where you find the accessories that work best for you as far as bringing up those main lifts. And this could be the 45-degree back extensions. That would be my number one for deadlift. And for bench, maybe dips or dumbbell bench or some variation like that. For squat, maybe Bulgarian split squats, or and the thing is, it's not going to be a lot. You're not going to come out with, oh, we need to do 1,000,000 leg extensions or stuff like that. Maybe more of that sort of thing in an off-season time frame to where you're not in meet prep. Because obviously with meet prep, you would cut out some assistance movements and make it more specific. But and it depends on how much time someone has. A younger guy who doesn't necessarily mind training for 3 to 4 hours, as crazy as that sounds. Obviously, we can throw in a lot more accessories for them. Whereas if I'm training someone who has a family and has a job and is 35 years old, they're not going to want to be in the gym that long. They're going to want to be in the gym hour and a half tops. So we would cut the accessories back or just cut the overall volume down a little bit. So that depends on situation. But I do tend to agree that a lot of if you were doing predominantly a lot of assistance movements as a natural lifter, it's not going to progress you. It may put size on you. It might be good for a bodybuilding physique perspective, but it's not going to get you stronger. It's kind of funny. It's like if you want to grow your legs, the best way to grow your legs, I would say, would be to do super light squats. Like I'm talking 30, 40 kilos for like 30 reps and do a bunch of sets like that, and your quads will blow up. But that won't do anything for your strength. So it really depends on the goal.
Sì, ho continuato a parlare con Pete riguardo alle differenze nella frequenza, nel volume e nella split settimanale tra farmaci e non, e sostanzialmente stavamo parlando un pochino di come siamo giunti in 3-4 alle stesse conclusioni, alle stesse osservazioni, cioè è un argomento che ho toccato con Mike Toshiro, è un argomento di cui ho parlato con Eric Helms e adesso ne parlavo con Pete, e dicevamo sostanzialmente che gira e rigira alla fine siamo tutti quanti giunti alla stessa conclusione, cioè che da natural devi utilizzare frequenze un po' più alte, fare molto più volume su range di intensità medi, quindi dal 70 all'80, 85%, fare volume lì, e che gira e rigira tutti quanti torniamo fuori con lo stesso tipo di split e frequenza, che è la più utilizzata in assoluto, cioè 3-4 panche a settimana, 2 squat, 2 stacchi, è la di gran lunga più utilizzata in giro per il mondo da più o meno tutti, con delle differenze mai su ragazze molto leggere che fanno mai frequenze un po' più alte e mai pesi massimi, super massimi, uomini che fanno frequenze un po' più basse perché appunto per gli stessi discorsi di cui abbiamo parlato altre volte. Ehm, E comunque è interessante come dicevamo che quello che si vede invece fare spesso da persone che utilizzano farmaci è che hanno frequenze molto più basse, fanno molto meno volume sulle alzate principali da gara, che magari fanno uno o due set pesanti e poi fanno una montagna di lavoro accessorio dopo, di stile bodybuilding, di muscolazione più generico, per probabilmente compensare l'impossibilità di fare tanto volume sull'alzata da gara. E questa è più o meno la stessa conclusione che siamo arrivati tutti quanti, cioè tutti quanti abbiamo alla fine pensato che fosse quello il motivo. Ma questo approccio qui non funziona su un classico atleta medio di livello intermedio alto, natural, perché ha bisogno di fare il grosso del lavoro, Pete diceva circa l'80%, con le alzate da gara, fare il volume lì e farne molto, spalmarlo, mettere frequenze un po' più alte e rilegare meno spazio al lavoro accessorio, che lui diceva appunto 80% lavoro specifico, 20% mai di accessori, e che mai questo può cambiare se sei vicino o lontano alla gara, però non fa nulla a livello di produzione della forza, di farti diventare più forte, magari fare tanti complementari come fanno persone che usano farmaci. Va bene per la forza, cioè va bene per mettere muscolo, va bene dal punto di vista estetico, però ma il lavoro molto leggero di bodybuilding, tipo le extension, cose così, non ti fa salire, progredire per un atleta natural. Pete, I would like to know your opinion about IPF lifter. What do you think if they, in your opinion, they are using drugs? Because, you know, I don't want to put fingers on anybody, but let's be real. Most of these guys are incredible strong, so strong that they are on the same level as the untested lifter. And they are competing under much stricter conditions without the monolift, with the workout in the squat, not squat bar, not deadlift bar, much deeper squat. Very strict judges, but sometimes are too strict in my opinion. And they are still doing the same numbers, or maybe even more sometimes than the untested lifter. I can understand genetics, I can understand whatever, but you know, let me be skeptical about this. What do you think?
Yes, this is one I go back and forth on because there are times where I want to give people the benefit of the doubt and think, yes, that's possible. But at the same time, for me, it's more the physique. If I look at someone's physique and I see certain things as far as very capped delts, huge
Mm-hmm.
traps, vascularity, I start to, be suspicious. Even looking at a U.S. lifter like Russell Ori, I'm a little
Yeah.
skeptical. That's just an example of, and I don't know. I'm not making an accusation. I don't know if he is or not, but you look at that and you say, that's a freakish level of muscle mass. The strength is at a freakish level. He's constantly getting stronger right now.
Mm-hmm.
His strength is blowing up. So that'd be one where I'd be like, I'd have some questions. Um, I do want to get some of the top US IPF and USAPL lifters and put them through a blood panel,
Yeah.
which we would test all their hormones and then we would go over it on YouTube on video. It's just a matter of getting guys to agree to this, and
Of course.
and that's a little tricky. But actually, I was going to ask Jesus Oliveras if he would do it.
Yeah.
Uh, because I feel like that'd be very interesting. He just competed, and
Yeah.
presumably 2 weeks later, we could check all of his hormones and see what they look like. And I haven't asked him yet. I probably should today. Um, to ask him if he'd be willing to do this because I'd partner with Merrick Health. They would like pay for everything, so these guys would really have no excuse. They would just have to go to the
Mm-hmm.
lab
Yeah.
and get checked.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's what I'd want to do to kind of see, okay, are your hormones legitimately all in a normal range to prove that you are natural? I would be very curious to see this. Whether or not these guys would agree to do it is another story. So if someone were to specifically like not want to do it, I would be pretty red flagged as far as the legitimacy of their natural status. Even if they were competing IPF or USAPL, I would still be I would question it, let's say. So I think if someone kind of avoided it or turned down the opportunity to prove their validity, then I would probably have some doubts. So you know, I don't think I could get Russ's attention either. He's such a big time guy that for me to track him down to get him to respond or anything would be kind of difficult. So that'd be one I'd want to do, but I don't know.
Let's say, I don't want to say anything wrong, but let's say that it's in his interest not to answer your email asking him to test. So, well, I'm skeptical because what you're doing is perfect. If someone refused to do it, and he has no excuse because you are paying everything, and just let me see your hormones and let's talk about it. So, how is that possible that we still see such an impressive performance here continuously over and over again? I don't know. I just don't think that the tests are good enough. I don't know. So I know you're big on the blood sample and testing blood after the meet. I think this is a good thing. I don't know if it's that possible to do on national level or regional level for everybody. I don't think it's possible, but as things are now, I don't think we are doing enough. I just don't think that IPF is so deeply into really find out who's on drugs and who's not. For me, it's hard to believe that they are really trying, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've been on both sides of the coin, so I can look at my physique and how it looked when I was on anabolic steroids compared to now. And it's a vast difference. It's not, I mean, there was so much more muscle when I was on anabolic steroids. The look was not even close to not being on it, even at the same body weight. So let's say I'm 104 kilos right now. Well, when I was 104 kilos on anabolic steroids, it didn't look anything like the 104 kilos I am now. The amount of muscle was ridiculous. So when I see these things, I'm like you, and I'm very skeptical because I know what it looks like and I know the difference. So I'm like, my eyes don't deceive me. I've been on both sides of the coin. I know the look. And I think, unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people who might be slipping through the cracks. And there's no good way to do this because unless we get them all to agree to do an extensive hormone panel, we're not going to know because a lot of them aren't going to agree to it. If they had anything to hide, they wouldn't agree to it. So it's a tough position, but I agree. I trained natural guys. I've trained natural guys for 10 years. The rate of progression is usually quite slow. So when you see massive, quick strength gains to these, unworldly numbers, it makes you very skeptical because I've seen so many people to where I know the progression is a slow chipping away process. And I know what the physique looks like. And then I see these other guys and they look freakish and their strength gains are insane. It makes you question things to a huge extent.
Ho chiesto a Pete cosa pensa degli IPF e del discorso se siano veramente puliti da un punto di vista di farmaci e doping, e abbiamo parlato un pochino del fatto che ti rende molto scettico la situazione perché ci sono tanti di questi ragazzi che sono estremamente forti con dei fisici assurdi, che fanno delle prestazioni assurde, che continuano a migliorare. La sua proposta era quella di sostanzialmente fare un test del sangue con tutto il pannello ormonale a distanza di pochi giorni dalla gara, e a quel punto non c'è nessun modo di ingannare il test, nel senso che i conti non quadrano, se uno ha fatto qualche magheggio salta fuori. Però purtroppo questa è una cosa che non si fa, e la cosa interessante è che lui sostanzialmente ha la possibilità di far fare, e è quello che ha intenzione di fare, questi test in maniera gratuita perché ha una sponsorizzazione con una clinica, ha alcuni dei top atleti che in teoria dovrebbero essere testati già nell'IPF americana, in modo da capire, venirne fuori, in particolare parlava di Jesus Oliveres, se era disponibile a prestarsi come cavia, e vorrebbe farlo anche altri, per esempio parlava anche di Russell O'Leary, ma non sempre è così facile trovare delle persone disponibili per queste cose e spesso hanno delle scuse, si mascherano dietro ad altre cose, nel caso anche di Russell, infatti comunque è molto impegnato, ha i suoi 1000 cazzi da portare avanti, e quindi mai lui gli chiede, ma non è detto che rispondano. Però diceva che sostanzialmente quando lui propone una cosa di questo tipo e dice guarda è tutto pagato, l'unica tua seccatura è prendere e andare quel giorno sulla clinica, ma il resto faccio tutto io, tu non spendi un centesimo, se si rifiutano è un bel campanello d'allarme, perché dice scusa che motivo hai di rifiutarti se sei veramente pulito. Però con questo metodo è chiaro che se uno ha qualcosa da nascondere salta fuori. Um, Pete, how do you think are these guys beating the test? Cioè, what are they doing? Because as you told me before, their performance keep improving meet after meet, and sometimes it's hard to find out who's for sure on that, because someone is for sure, you can see they are on and off, the performance change from day to day, and it's obvious, but most of the guys, most of the big names, they're quite stable. They just keep improving a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, in a much faster rate than a natural lifter. But you don't see the red flags, the usual red flags with very big size effect or a very big change in the way they lift. They are pretty much stable, but they keep on improving. They never injure themselves. So, what do you think are they doing to beat the test?
I think a lot of it would come down to taking bioidentical
Mm.
hormones. So that's where you would really, if you're going to take anything, you would take growth hormone, insulin, and testosterone. Those would be the three that you're naturally going to produce. So you could take those essentially and not have metabolites in your system, because the whole thing is with the drug testing, it's all metabolite testing. So it's all to see, okay, do you have metabolites from trenbolone or dianabol or boldenone? Do you have all these in your system? So if you're taking bioidentical compounds, you could essentially skirt around the process. Now, from what I understand with synthetic testosterone, if the ratio of testosterone to epitestosterone is below 4-1, then the synthetic testosterone will not show up. So what you would do is you would take testosterone, but you would also take epitestosterone to keep the ratio in your favor. And that would be those would be the main ways in which someone would kind of skirt around the problem. I don't know if they're testing for things like gray area, things like testosterone. I mean, that could be argued that that is okay, but it could also, it's been shown to raise testosterone levels. So there's some gray area stuff, but I would say the majority of people would simply take testosterone and then they would take some epitestosterone to keep the ratio favorable. And that would be the most simplistic thing that everyone would do. Or they would, especially the thing I think people would do is they would take very short acting esters of testosterone. They would take testosterone base or testosterone suspension. So testosterone base is suspended in oil and testosterone suspension is suspended in water, but the half-life is extremely short to where you could take these and they could be out of your system very quickly. So that seems like the most likely candidate, maybe testosterone propionate, which has a longer half-life than suspension, but still fairly short. And you could essentially cycle in an off-season phase and then have the compounds out of your system by the time competition rolled around, or you could just take epitestosterone to keep the ratio favorable. So that's what I think is going on.
How far from the meet should you stop to take the suspension test?
Well, suspension, I believe the half-life allows it to clear the body in 24 hours.
Oh
So,
shit.
yeah, so suspension you could do fairly close to a competition. propionate is more around a week or so. That's another option, but it's clear that if you had an off-season phase, particularly during the whole COVID situation when no one was testing, you could get away with a lot of stuff and then, come back and be fine. But you could even theoretically, you could run testosterone right up until the meet. And if you were supplementing with epitestosterone, you could keep that ratio favorable. I don't know how many people can get their hands on epitestosterone, truthfully. I think it's a little harder to get a hold of, but people could be these guys could be very well taking short-acting testosterone, insulin, and growth hormone. And those would likely not get popped. That'd be a way around it because growth hormone would increase your IGF-1, which they don't test for. IGF-1. Insulin's not going to get tested for. And then the testosterone would be out of the system so quickly that it could fall back into range very fast.
Ho chiesto a Pete come pensa che possano fare, cioè quali siano le strategie farmacologiche che usano questi atleti per superare comunque i test antidoping. E mi diceva che ovviamente queste sono supposizioni, pensa che utilizzino principalmente ormoni bioidentici e i tre principali candidati sono GH, insulina e testosterone bioidentico. Perché il GH e l'insulina, che dopo casomai gli chiedo meglio, non vengono trovati nei test. Il testosterone mi diceva che ci sono diverse tipologie di farmaci a base di testosterone che su base oleosa sono molto più lenti tra virgolette, smaltire, quindi vengono fuori anche a distanza di tempo nei test. Però su base acquosa diceva che probabilmente anche già un giorno, se tu smetti un giorno prima della gara, probabilmente non te lo trovano e che quindi tu puoi continuare a utilizzarlo fino a praticamente attaccato la gara. O un'altra strategia che vi diceva è che siccome nei test sostanzialmente valutano il rapporto tra testosterone e epitestosterone e deve essere di 1 a 4, se una persona prende testosterone si alzerebbe il rapporto, no? E quindi viene indicato molto come dopato. Ma se l'atleta assume contemporaneamente anche epitestosterone, cerca di mantenere il range all'interno dei limiti, anche se il testosterone è stato assunto dall'esterno, comunque essendo stato assunto anche l'epitestosterone, al test comunque viene fuori pulito. Però diceva che non è semplicissimo mettere le mani e recuperare appunto l'epitestosterone, che quindi mai non ha detto che lo stiano tutti facendo questa strategia come diciamo strategia per andare in gara. E, e niente, queste erano le modalità principali che spiegava Pete per cercare di arrivare in gara e diceva in particolare che questo è il pre-gara, dopo lontano dalla gara ovviamente hai molte più scelte di fare molte più cose se sai che non vieni testato e in particolare è successo così nel periodo del Covid dove per un po' nessuno non ha testato niente. So you were talking about insulin and GH. Um, how do you think they are useful for strength? How do you think they are good? Do you think they are good just for bodybuilding? What do you think?
I think of those two as more bodybuilding drugs, but at the same time, they're going to provide muscle mass and fullness, to which I know a lot more powerlifters are big in those now than they used to be less of a thing. And then in the last 5 years, they've become more of a thing in powerlifting because they're going to allow you to shuttle nutrients better and get more out of your diet and your protein intake, and you're going to fill out more. And that's where I think a lot of the size we see comes from, where these guys have very round muscle bellies and they don't look natural. It adds that size and that shape that we're like, okay, that doesn't really look like a natural guy would look, with the vascularity and stuff like that. So I think it's all just a combination of these things that goes on. I don't know a percentage of people who I would think would be doing this kind of stuff. I mean, maybe it's 10%, but it just would be interesting, especially too, to see like at the very highest end of the sport, the best guys, what are their testosterone levels at? So let's say they're genetic freaks. Would be curious, what does the hormone makeup look like for them? That's not even taking into account like their genes or anything, because they might have more fast twitch fibers and stuff like that. We don't even have to go that far, but it just would be interesting to see what a general blood panel would look like for someone who's a complete outlier, freak of nature, top natural guy. Say that's a Jesus Olivares. Because we have no insight on this. There's no one out there at a high natural level that we know of what their levels are at or what they're working with. Because I think it would be a lot more interesting to people if you were looked at it and said, okay, Jesus Olivares, his testosterone level is 800, and then you'd at least have a basis for comparison to yourself where you're naturally sitting at 550 or so. So it just would be interesting to get a clearer picture.
So how much do you think it changed in regard to performance for powerlifting? Only GH and insulin.
I don't think it would be GH and insulin alone would not be a huge advantage for powerlifting from a strength standpoint compared to even just testosterone by itself. So testosterone by itself, which is the most likely scenario for what people are doing. If we said 10% of people are cheating, and we said, what are the majority of them doing? The majority of them would not be taking insulin and GH. A potentially small group could of that 10% subset, but the majority of that 10% would simply just be taking straight testosterone, which there is kind of a incorrect stigma that TRT testosterone itself isn't that great. It's a huge difference. I mean, there's been times where I've just been on a small amount of testosterone and I was much stronger than I would be naturally. So that's completely false narrative that just being on a little bit of testosterone doesn't make that much of a difference. I've seen it change people's physiques entirely. I've seen it change people's strength makeup entirely. So the majority of people who are cheating would just be taking testosterone and that's it, but they're going to still see a massive advantage from that.
Ho chiesto a Pete cosa pensa che possa dare da solo come miglioramento della performance il GH e l'insulina, e mi ha detto che non pensa ci siano molti che utilizzano GH e insulina da soli e che nel powerlifting ha detto che molto probabilmente quello che stanno più che altro facendo è testosterone e basta, o comunque una qualcosa di quel tipo, una strategia di quel tipo, perché lì l'insulina e il GH insieme da un punto di vista bodybuilding è un discorso e aiutano molto dal punto di vista anche estetico, ma da un punto di vista di performance non pensa che facciano tutto questo grandi risultati, e che sicuramente è molto più probabile che questi atleti utilizzino testosterone con le modalità che mi diceva prima. E mi diceva poi che comunque sarebbe molto curioso per lui vedere i livelli di testosterone di molti di questi atleti e anche come variano nel tempo, per capire insomma il potenziale, l'aspetto genetico, insomma, per farsi un quadro migliore di come mai questi atleti sono così speciali, di cosa fanno, cosa non fanno, e ovviamente sarebbe molto interessante. Let's say that you already know when you're going to be tested. So you compete just once for a year or two for a year. You are sure nobody is going to test you outside the meet. So I think it's. I think most of the guys will probably think, okay, I have like 5, 6, 7 months straight with no one ever coming here to test me. So what do you think is the main strategies they are going to use?
I would say that people would just run, like I said, often the most simple answer is the best answer. So if we look at what's the most simple route someone could take to cheat, they would just take testosterone. So they would take testosterone during the off season, and they could make some pretty good strength gains to where even when you come off testosterone, it's not like your strength is immediately going to fall off a cliff. It will take a period of months, upwards of a year, for that strength to go all the way down. So you could see someone to where they could take it for, say, 3, 4 months on end, come off it, and they would still be maintaining much of the strength gains even months afterward, It's not like it's just going to completely go away. You know, for me, when I came off everything, the strength really started to disappear after about 6 months, upwards of a year. So there's still enough time to where you can reap a huge benefit from that. Let's say your competition, you stop a month before the competition, you're still maintaining a lot of it. You might not maintain all of it, but you'll maintain a lot of it. And then after the competition, you could roll right back into it. That would be the most likely scenario for what people are doing. I really think if we just look at it from the most basic standpoint of what they're all doing, anyone who's cheating, the most likely answer in the case of 80% of the people who would be cheating would be they were just taking testosterone in off-season periods or very fast-acting testosterone. That's it. They're probably only taking testosterone, but that alone, like I said, will reap enough benefits to where they can benefit, come off it, and still maintain much of it because it's not a long enough time frame. That's the most likely scenario as far as what goes on.
Do you think that maybe they are mixing together some peptides or some SARMs?
I think that was going on a lot more a few years ago. As far as I know now, WADA tests for all that stuff. So the peptides, when they were more new, the SARMs and peptides, when it was kind of a new thing 5 years ago, and no one really knew about them, I think those were huge. I think back then everybody was using that stuff. Now I believe they test for all that stuff. So that's where I go back to nowadays, it probably is mainly just testosterone. Whereas, let's say 2017, it was probably a heck of a lot of peptides and SARMs because they were so new that they didn't have tests for them. And that's when they were kind of just coming out. That's when I think that was going on. But I think that has fizzled out now because they're, as far as I know, they're tested for now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure some of them at least they are tested because back in I think it was 2017 or 2018 or around that period, there were a big name in the APF who was popped. I think it was a Canadian lifter, heavyweight Canadian. The one who's against Ray Williams, the Canadian.
Oh,
He was
yeah,
around a
Kelly
1,000 pound
Brand.
squat. Yeah, that him. He was popped for some some steroids. I don't remember which one, and also for some SARMs. I think it was MK 677 and something else.
Well, the other thing,
So
actually, I forgot one thing though. This is very possible. Another way in which I would say the large majority of people are cheating that actually could quite possibly it would mimic the same effects of testosterone, but it would be a sneakier way around it. That I don't remember off the top of my head the half-life. A lot of guys who might not want to use needles, this is what they would do. So if someone doesn't want to use a needle and they don't want to go to all that trouble, and they could justify this a lot better. You could justify it because it's not a needle. They would cheat by taking clomiphene citrate, Clomid, because Clomid alone at a low dose is going to raise your testosterone levels almost double. So you could take a very low dose of clomiphene and your testosterone levels could go from 600 to 1200 without even needing to take a needle. So that's another one that's probably going on a lot. I think that might be actually more likely even. Another possible way they could cheat would be to do estrogen blockers, aromatase inhibitors. So Arimidex, Aromacin, you could take these by themselves and they would also block SHBG and raise your testosterone levels substantially as well. So those are probably very two likely scenarios. So I would say majority of people are taking testosterone, Clomid, or Arimidex. And those are the three things they're doing. So everything revolves around boosting testosterone levels. That's how everyone cheats, trying to get super physiological testosterone levels in the 1,000 to 1,500 plus range, maybe upwards of 2,000. And they would do that by taking those three things. So that's what I think happens.
Ok, ho continuato a chiedere a Pete cosa pensano che facciano per battere i test, magari anche a partire dall'off season, da diciamo 5, 6, 7 mesi, dove sai già a distanza dalla gara, dico, dove sai già che non verrai testato, quali sarebbero le strategie più convenienti secondo lui. E mi diceva sostanzialmente che molto probabilmente la maggior parte di chi cerca di superare i test e utilizza farmaci usa testosterone, ok? E lo stacca prima della gara, mi ha detto per esempio già un mese, anche se tu stacchi un mese prima, non risulti ai test, ma comunque non è che perdi tutta la forza lì istantaneamente, ma ti resta buona parte della forza per mesi, quindi perdi un po', ma non è che perdi tutto. E comunque hai comunque tanti grandi vantaggi anche se hai staccato un mese. Oppure usi il testosterone su base acquosa che appunto ha una vita molto breve, lo puoi staccare anche molto molto vicino alla gara. E gli ho chiesto se pensa che possano mescolarsi in mezzo anche qualche peptide o qualche sarma, mi ha detto che secondo lui era molto più di moda, diciamo, far così all'inizio, 4, 5, 6 anni fa, quando erano poco testati, erano poco conosciute queste cose qua, sono esplose un po' la moda dei SARMs, ma adesso molto probabilmente molto meno, e che comunque adesso li testano quasi tutti, quindi risulterebbero dai test anche i SARMs. Infatti dicevamo l'esempio di un atleta in IPF canadese che era stato positivo per alcuni SARM. Poi diceva su altre strategie che si potrebbero possibilmente utilizzare per alzare il testosterone in qualche forma, in qualche modo, e comunque venirne fuori puliti dai test, è quella di utilizzare antiestrogeni, quindi lui ha fatto il nome di un farmaco, si chiama Rimidex, perché bloccando la conversione degli estrogeni, dal testosterone agli estrogeni, comunque sarebbe alla fine un netto aumento del testosterone endogeno. E, ho un'altra opzione con il Clomid, che è un altro farmaco che stimola l'aumento di produzione endogena di testosterone, e quindi ha detto che solo con quello magari si può anche arrivare a passare cioè addirittura di raddoppiare il testosterone, cioè i livelli di testosterone senza assumere dall'esterno testosterone, e che pensa che queste tre possibilità, quindi Clomid, Arimidex e testosterone bioidentico, siano le tre principali strategie che vengono utilizzate. Do you think it's possible that maybe someone use insulin for the weight gain after the weight cut for the weight classes?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I was just talking to a guy, not natural, but a guy who says this is very prevalent nowadays in untested lifting. So it would theoretically make sense in tested. The only issue I could see though is with the 2 hour weigh-ins,
Yeah.
um it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, I think, with the 2 hour weigh-ins. So I could see that point, but at the same time, I still think the bulk of it comes down to just taking, instead of a cocktail of things, I think people are either taking one of the possible testosterone, Clomid, Arimidex trifecta. They're taking one of those, and that's likely it. So it's not very advanced. I don't think people are thinking through this, to a huge extent or researching it. I think it's very simple. The simplest answer is often the most likely answer, and that's what they're doing. They're either taking just one thing, but they're taking testosterone, Clomid, Arimidex, and that's boosting their test levels significantly to where they have an advantage. That is how I'd say pretty much everybody is doing what they're doing.
Hmm. So, do you think maybe some of them are using diuretics?
The diuretics, I don't think are much of a thing again with 2 hour weigh-ins because it
Mm.
just wouldn't be enough. It would compromise your performance too much to use those right before with a 2 hour weigh-in in tested lifting. In untested lifting, they're absolutely using tons of diuretics all the time, but it's not a problem. In 24-hour weigh-ins, you can recover. So, when I really try to think about it as, real as I can with what exactly are people doing to cheat in IPF and USAPL, I think it really centers around those three compounds. I think the other things would be too difficult for people to time and to appropriately administer. Possibly growth hormone. There could be some of that going on. But I think 90% of it would be testosterone, Arimidex, and Clomid, and that's it. I think, and that's not to. Those play a huge role in strength. Those would make a massive difference. So those are a substantial advantage, massive. But I don't think people are running things that would show up on a WADA panel uh, as far as getting popped. And Arimidex would get you popped, but if it was out of your system fast enough, same could be said for Clomid. All these things, if they were out of your system in time, you could theoretically run really close and be okay. So I think what I think most people do is they run one of those things, and then at a certain time frame, say 3 to 4 weeks before a competition, they would pull them out, and then they would coast into the meet and not get popped. That's what I think is the main strategy for what goes on.
Ho chiesto a Pete se pensa che sempre nei PF con i test e tutto utilizzino l'insulina per riprendere peso dopo dopo il taglio del peso per entrare in categoria di peso, o che altre strategie ci possono essere, e mi diceva sostanzialmente che cioè, sicuramente lo fanno molto tantissimo nell'untested, quindi dove non ci sono i test antidoping, ma hanno un tempo tra la pesa e la gara molto più grande di solito, e quindi hai la possibilità di fare dei tagli peso molto maggiori e hai il tempo sufficiente per riprendere il peso dopo. E quindi loro di prassi praticamente quasi tutti utilizzano diuretici e poi magari prendono l'insulina per aiutarsi a riprendere il peso e i nutrienti dopo la pesa. Però non pensa che sia una cosa prevalente o molto fatta in IPF, perché c'è il limite di 2 ore tra quando fai la pesa e quando sali in pedana, e non c'è abbastanza tempo per fare queste cose qua. E quindi probabilmente non è conveniente. E sostanzialmente mi ribadiva che è molto probabile che la maggioranza di chi utilizza farmaci e voglia superare i test, sostanzialmente la strategia si basi su testosterone, clomide, Arimidex, e che li stacchino 3-4 settimane dalla gara e basta, senza fare grandi altre strategie articolate. Um, what do you think are some of the peptides for strength and powerlifting? The benefit, which one do you think most of the guys are using?
Yeah, peptide wise, most of them are like growth hormone analogs. So most of the peptides are simply there to increase growth hormone output and natural growth hormone output. Now, most of them are banned by WADA and would be on the list as far as the metabolites. But again, it all comes down to clearance time. If clearance time is there, you can still take them in the off season or whatever and have them out of your system. I just don't know. I don't think they'd help to a tremendous extent with strength. But, things like GHRP6, these could be run. It's just not worth the risk reward as much as it's straight testosterone. Because, raising growth hormone isn't going to give you the strength advantage that testosterone will. So I think that was very popular. Like I said, back in like 2017, when that was newer, I'd say all that stuff was very popular. But now I don't think it's very popular. Like I'm sure back when Rad 140 came out, which is a SARM, and it's basically the strongest SARM. I'm sure when that came out, people were taking that all the freaking time because that is extremely strong. It's almost stronger than a lot of steroids, and it's a SARM. And I think a lot of people were running Rad 140 back in the day, but now you'd almost and here's the other thing, I don't know the half-lives exactly of everything, but people could be running Rad 140 in the off season, making crazy strength gains, and then coming off it far enough out that it might not show up because Rad 140 is extremely strong and it's just an oral, it's just a pill. So I think a lot of tested lifters are dissuaded from taking shots, taking injections, but you don't have to do that when you take clomiphene, Rad 140, or Arimidex. So these are things they could run in the off season. And that would make a lot of sense too.
Mm-hmm. Ho chiesto a Pete se pensa che ci siano dei peptidi utili per il powerlifting, per la forza e eventualmente quali sono i più utilizzati secondo lui. E mi ha detto che la maggioranza dei peptidi sono sostanzialmente delle molecole che stimolano la produzione di GH, ma non pensa abbiano tutta questa grande utilità in termini di forza e di performance. Pensa che probabilmente fossero molto più utilizzati un po' di anni fa quando erano un po' in voga e che la maggioranza delle persone li utilizzasse nell'off season e calcolando un po' i tempi, siccome sono rari, calcolando un po' i tempi per staccare in anticipo e non venire beccati sui test. E mi diceva che tempo fa era molto utilizzato anche un altro SARM che è Rad 140, che è un SARM molto, molto forte che secondo Pete è addirittura superiore a molti steroidi e che quello insomma qualche anno fa era estremamente utilizzato e adesso pensa meno, però comunque potrebbe essere utilizzato appunto lontano dalla gara e staccato in tempo. Pete, when I see some of these big lifters that are always improving, and they seems like they are never going to have an injury or anything wrong. They keeps going and going and going with such heavy lifting. So I can understand maybe some tests here and there, but sometimes I think that maybe the GH or some peptides like something that can improve maybe it's not directly improving your performance, but maybe it can improve the rate of recovery for connective tissue. So do you think some of this kind of uh, peptides or any other products that are popular so that they can keep improving and they have a longer career?
Yes, I mean, if they were to look at healing compounds, I could see a lot of guys running BPC 157 and TB 500 in the off season to kind of heal the joints up. I don't, and that'd be a very plausible answer because those aren't necessarily going to get you stronger, but they will definitely accelerate the rate of recovery. Both BPC 157 and TB 500, which are um, the two most commonly used healing peptides out there. So like I was looking at clomiphene, the detection time is 4 months.
Oh.
So you would have to really run that in the off season and then yeah, it's 4 months. So it just depends on the compound because then we could look at testosterone propionate. Let's look at that one. And that, testosterone propionate has a half-life of 2 to 4 days. Now, I don't know if that's exactly mimics the detection time. Yeah, so I mean, you could theoretically take testosterone propionate and clear the body in, a couple days, and testosterone suspension 4 to 24 hours. So clomiphene being 4 months, that might be a little more of a, not as good of an option, but testosterone can clear very quickly. HCG, let's look at that one. So HCG detection time. Let's see if I can find anything because it all comes up for natural HCG levels, but HCG also raises testosterone. Let's look up RAD 140. What is the RAD 140 detection time? Okay, let's see here. RAD 140. So you really just have to play around with the detection times, and that's going to tell you how long you can get away with something. So this one, I mean, this is really fascinating. RAD 140 can be detected for 6 to 8 days. I mean, so you're telling me you could run this in like a week before your competition, stop it. You'd be stupid strong, That's a one that's possible. I mean, that's crazy. That'd be what everybody would be doing then. I mean, that's crazy. Because you don't know how scientific these sources are, but Where is that at? Let's see here. I'm trying to find it. Because this one, I'm seeing
Because I'm
Rad
not
one.
sure about this. I'm not sure about this, but maybe it's different. The detection time from the half-life are two different things. But maybe
Well,
because you're looking for some metabolites, but maybe it's in your system for longer.
that's true that the detection time is much longer than the half-life, but I'm seeing, Rad 140 half-life of 60 hours, which would be about
Oof.
2.5 days, whereas the detection time they're saying is about 8 days. So
Mm-hmm.
even 8 days, you could dump that out of your system a week, 2 weeks before a competition, come up clean, and be way the heck stronger, um, based on what I'm seeing. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be, you know, that's interesting. That's really interesting because this would lead me to believe that people would be taking SARMs, like you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and just cycling off them in time. Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. Listen to this one. Rad 140. This is off PubMed, which is 100% legit. They do all the studies. In plasma, so in blood plasma, Rad 140 gave the longest detection time of up to 13 days. Do you know what that means? That means at the longest, less than 2 weeks. So I could blast the crap out of Rad 140 before my competition, right? I could be an IPF guy. I could say, I'm going to run Rad 140, which keep in mind is stronger for a lot of guys than Anadrol. So Anadrol, very powerful steroid. I have seen a lot of my guys who don't compete tested, by the way, but a lot of my guys take Rad 140, gets better strength gains than Anadrol, one of the most powerful anabolic steroids. We could run this 2 weeks up until our IPF mate, come off it 2 weeks before, test clean. How silly is that?
That's explaining a lot of things.
That's what they're doing. That's what they're
Holy
doing.
shit.
So what we just found proof of, because we just I've never looked into the detection times a whole lot. We just walked through this. You could probably eliminate Clomid because it's got too long of a detection time, 4 months. So let's say they're not doing that one. And a lot of people don't want to take a needle, right? A lot of people don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
it. Testosterone, I could clear it out of my body in a day. But if I don't want to do a needle, if I'm like, I don't want to do a needle, I don't want to mess with that, I don't want to have needles laying around, take a SARM, it's out of my body in 2 weeks to a week. I could run it right up to the meat. People are doing that. That's how they're cheating. So I would say actually, if I just by looking at things a little
Mm-hmm.
further, they're taking SARMs and testosterone. That's all they're doing. That's what they're doing.
Stavo parlando io e Pete un attimo di peptidi e altre cose che stanno facendo con i tempi di detenzione. Si è messo un attimino a cercare su internet in questo momento i tempi di detenzione, cioè dopo quanto tempo puoi trovare il test positivo per determinati prodotti e ha detto che il Clomid in realtà c'è un tempo di detenzione abbastanza lungo che lo può essere trovato anche a distanza di 4 mesi e che quindi ha detto, contando i tempi così lunghi, probabilmente lo usano solo o molto lontano dalle gare oppure non lo usano proprio. Mentre guardavo di alcuni altri prodotti, in particolare Red 140, che sostanzialmente da dei dati molto seri, anche presi da uno studio su PubMed, al massimo è stato ritrovato all'esame del sangue a distanza di mi pare 13 giorni e che quindi sostanzialmente tu puoi prenderlo fino a 2 settimane prima della gara senza nessun problema. E, anche il testosterone appunto su base acquosa che ha dei tempi di detenzione estremamente brevi e quindi molto probabilmente se uno non vuole usare gli aghi, usare le siringhe, probabilmente userà dei SAMs come il RAD 140. Well, this is interesting. I think that explains a lot of things.
It's frustrating for me to even dig further down the rabbit hole because I don't believe anyone when I see this stuff. I'm like, you're telling me that everyone could take SARMs and have it out of their system in 2 weeks. How the heck are they going to catch anyone? They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
not. You would have to be testing these guys all year round. Otherwise, of course, they're all going to run SARMs. They're going to run SARMs right up until the competition,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to get crazy strength gains. So listen, the further I look into this, I think everybody's cheating. Not everybody, but no, I think it's almost deflating because it's like if you want to believe, this can shatter your opinion of believing that the best people. And I do think I can look at someone's physique and kind of know, but I mean, come on now, this is ridiculous. If I could run a SARM, because all of it's metabolite testing, all of the drug testing is testing for metabolites, and I can run a SARM for who knows how long and just come off it, and I'm good to go. I mean, that's very upsetting. So I think the validity of the drug testing is it's not good. But what are they gonna do? There's not a lot of other options as far as what they can
Yeah.
do. It's just frustrating because it very much shows how easy it is
Mm-hmm.
to cheat. Very easy.
For example, in Italy, at nationals, in the name is FIPL. This is the Italian Federation for IPF. At nationals, they test just for 2, 3 guys in the whole competition, and there are many more competitors, like over 1,000. So in 1,000 people competing, they test just 1, 2 guys on competition day, not on other days. And so you're not even testing all the winners of the category. You just test 1, 2 here and there sometimes. That explains a lot of things because I can understand genetics, I can understand everything, but when you're squatting like over 300 kilos in the 80 class, it could be just one zone accuracy, not many more. So it's hard for me to believe that these younger guys at 20, 22, 23, squatting 300 like nothing with very huge muscular body. It's very rare. So I can understand 1, 2, but not so many. Um, so it's frustrating, like you said, it's frustrating because now the question is, do you think it's possible to be competitive even in drug testing, in drug tested federation without PEDs?
Maybe a few outliers. Like who's that guy? Emil Norlin or whatever?
Yeah,
I think he's
Sweden, for Sweden.
I think he's pretty legit. Like he's like elite, but I don't think he's dirty, you know? So I think there's guys like him who can do it. Um, but how many of those guys are there? You
Mhm.
know?
Why do you think? Why do you think he's clean? Do you mean Emil Norling, the from Sweden, the blonde guy?
Yep.
Okay. Why do you think so?
His physique, first of all.
Oh.
His physique is not the appearance of someone with crazy muscle bellies and huge traps and vascularity, and he just doesn't look the part. And then you got to
Mm.
also consider that Sweden is extremely strict about general testosterone and PED usage. Like, not even like America doesn't care. America, you can take all
Mm.
the PEDs you want, police and stuff don't care. Whereas in Sweden, they will like come arrest you and like freak out about it. So just the level of strictness of the consequences of having any of that in Sweden are huge. So they're much less inaccessible. Um, Coupled with he doesn't look the part as far as being someone on PEDs. So that would be my example of someone who can achieve an elite level, who is not on PEDs. And I don't even know his exact numbers off the top of my head. I know he's quite strong. He was
I
just
think
at the,
over 900 total in the
yeah,
IPF. I think
let's,
he squatted like 320 and deadlift like 375 or something like that in the 105 class.
yeah, see, oh, let's see here. He's got a 347.5 kg squat. Okay,
Oh.
that's pretty ridiculous. Um, his bench is about 210. his deadlift is 385-ish, I believe that is the 380. So he is extremely strong. It does make more sense that he's 105, because if he was doing that at like, 83, I'd be like, but 105 makes, I mean, Mike Teixeira himself had some freakish numbers naturally. And so
But
it's possible.
he was 120, I think.
Exactly. So it is possible to have good
Mm-hmm.
numbers naturally. It's just that these guys are not very common. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
he's clean, just looking at him and stuff like that. Um, so there are guys out there. It's just very rare.
Mm-hmm. Ho chiesto a Pete, stava un po' parlando di se secondo lui è possibile essere competitivi, dato quello che abbiamo detto, se è possibile secondo lui essere competitivi in IPF da puliti. Diciamo che dice che è estremamente improbabile, e mai potrebbe esserci un outlier qua e là, uno veramente, uno ogni chissà quanti, però si tratta appunto di uno, non di così tanti come ne vediamo, e che comunque è estremamente improbabile. Poi faccio l'esempio di Emil Norling, il ragazzo svedese che ha vinto gli europei l'altro anno. Stavamo guardando un po' i suoi numeri e diceva che secondo lui quello potrebbe essere l'esempio di uno estremamente dotato a livello elite, eccetera, che magari, chi lo sa, potrebbe anche essere forse pulito, perché non ha dei tipici segni anche estetici che Pete riconosce che siano indicativi, diciamo. Um, how can we know that someone is clean? I mean, you already told me about the appearance, the muscle belly and stuff like that, but um, sometimes it's very hard because I'm still thinking about John Heck and the 2016 Worlds game, the World IPF Worlds, and if John, it's incredible for me to think that I was sure he was on drugs back then, but now I can see what he can do now, and I can say, okay, maybe he's the outlier. Maybe he's the one who is possibly able to win a IPF world without drugs, because now he's on drugs. I can see the difference, but I cannot say the same thing for others, because let's choose someone. Let's say Russell Hoy or someone, Rushka, Aston Rushka, and people like that. They are already over the top. They are already so much stronger, so much bigger than everybody else, and officially they are clean. So what's going to happen if they are truly clean and they're now taking stuff like double the size of Ronnie Coleman and lifting 500 kg squat for 80 kilo weight class? I don't think it's possible anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at John Hack now, his numbers, um, when he was not on anything, were good, but not absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and I look at how he looked back then, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense. I actually just looked at Emil Norling. He's pretty, he's huge too. I didn't know. I looked and I'm like, okay, he's freaking jacked. I don't know. I just think there's no way to truly know if someone's natural, but we could get a more accurate picture of if they are by hormone levels and blood panels as far as that,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to skirting around metabolite testing by coming off in time. So, and for the guys who are not natural and who are competing that way, they're much more scared of doing a hormone blood panel than they are of doing the old urine metabolite testing, because they know they can beat the urine metabolite testing just by coming off in time. But they know that a hormone panel, there's a lot of stuff that could be screwed up that you can't get around. Um, so that's why that would be more valid as far as whether or not someone's truly natural. But good luck getting someone to agree to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of crappy because there is no good way to prove that someone's natural. Um, but I have a high suspicion that many are not.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's funny because back in 2016, everybody were saying, "Oh, there's no way John Hack is drug free. No way," because he was squatting as a junior 300 kgs at 80 kgs body weight. But today there are many lifters squatting that kind of weight at the same body weight, officially drug free, and nobody says anything. Everybody is saying, "Oh, that's possible. Maybe it's natural. Don't worry." But how is that possible? I don't think it's just possible to be able to do that kind of thing. As you said, one outlier, okay, not more than one or two. Well, I translate a little bit and then I'm done, Pete. Thank you. Parlavo con Pete, dicevamo appunto di come sia improbabile che tanti di questi atleti che fanno queste prestazioni incredibili siano puliti, perché facciamo un po' di confronti anche per esempio con John Hack e il fatto che nel 2016 abbia vinto il mondiale IPF e che probabilmente, adesso questo è discutibile, però probabilmente era pulito a quel tempo, anche se tutti lo accusavano, perché poi è passato alle federazioni non testate e è esploso, cioè le sue prestazioni sono diventate strabilianti, tutti lo conoscono adesso, insomma, è visibile anche esteticamente la differenza. Quindi quello potrebbe essere stato un caso dove effettivamente c'è un outlier, dove uno è veramente lo scherzo della natura e fa delle prestazioni folli da natura. Però non si spiegano tutte le altre, nel senso che io facevo notare come nel 2016 effettivamente tutti puntano il dito a un 300 di squat a 80 kg di peso corporeo, a oggi nessuno si scandalizza più e ce ne sono parecchi, non ce n'è uno, ce ne sono diversi. Quindi o tutti quanti sono come John Hack, e è improbabile, o c'è qualcosa che non quadra. Okay, Pete, do you have anything more you want to talk about or anything to ask about maybe some Italian powerlifting or stuff, whatever?
No, sir. I think I just made myself more depressed though about the state of drug tested lifting, but I don't let it bother. I'm not like heavily in the sport anymore to where I'm like, but it's just kind of funny. I'm like, well, that's probably not true. That probably throws some. It's like you find out Santa Claus isn't real, you start to be like, okay, well, I wanted to believe, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt to where I'm like,
Mhm,
okay, they're maybe just, it's all because you want to think people are morally and ethically doing the right thing, but it does make you wonder a little bit when you find out just how quickly SARMs can clear the system. I'm like,
mhm,
wow, okay, that's interesting. Because I've never even truly looked into the detection time
mhm.
until now. So,
Sì, Pete mi diceva che si è un po' scoraggiato, si è un po' depresso a sentire queste cose qui, a guardare i tempi di attenzione e rendersi conto appunto di come molto probabilmente ci sono molte più persone che utilizzano farmaci di quello che sembri. E dopo, tra l'altro, prima mi ha aggiunto una cosa mentre facevo la traduzione, che si è messo a guardare un attimo meglio Emil Norling e ha visto che effettivamente è grosso e anche lui, quindi in realtà ha un po' tirato indietro su quello che ha detto prima, che potrebbe essere natural, perché guardandolo meglio e guardando meglio i numeri ha detto ma non lo so. Però sì, sostanzialmente è scoraggiante vedere come ci sia tutta questa facilità nell'utilizzare farmaci in base alle prestazioni che si vedono. You know something, Pete? To me also it's interesting when I see some of the old videos of some old meet. Let's say, for example, the meet I was talking you about before, the backyard meet, in which you competed in back in 2013, maybe. Um, yeah. Um, at that meet, if you watch and see the numbers the people were lifting, nowadays these numbers don't look that impressive anymore. They're natural guys doing that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, they were the best of the time. They were on all sort of drugs, and the squat are not as deep as the IPF squat, and with most of them with knee wraps, monolift, deadlift bar, and so on. And still, we see the same or even more and stronger performance now in drug free lifter.
Yeah, there's just no good way to know. There's no good way to
Mm.
know if someone's who they say they are.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay, Pete. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, you're very humble and kind. Thank you very much for everything. I'm done with the question. If you're good, we can close up now.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'll send this stuff over to you. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Pete. Bye.
Bye.